Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday Evening Forex Breakdown. My name is Gail Mercer, and I will be your hostess for today. Now, I do want you to remember that anytime you are trading, there is a potential for a loss, and that includes even trading on Nadex. Remember, if you cannot afford to take the loss, you should not be trading. Okay? Now, before we get started, for those of you that do not know me, my name is Gail Mercer, and I am the founder of Traders Help Desk. I have probably been trading for a little over 15 years, and I actually started out with a company that programmed indicators for the different platforms, and I just simply fell in love with the price bars. I do specialize on volume analysis, how to trade binary options and spreads, as well as touch brackets. I've also written several books on trading Nadex binary options and spreads. I've also been a frequent contributor to Stocks and Commodities magazine, as well as Traders Expo, Traders World, and I was also a speaker at the Wyckoff Volume Conference, as well as the TradeStation user groups. Now, I want to get started tonight looking at the reports that we have this week. They are very substantial, okay? Number one, Monday night, we have the Aussie RBA rate statement. And then on Wednesday, we have the Bank of Canada rate statement. On Thursday, we have the main refinancing rate on the euro, as well as the press conference. And then on Friday, we have the biggest market report of the month, which is non-farm employment change. Okay, so this week we have a lot of very, very substantial, volatile reports. And I can't stress that enough, because what you may see is that the markets kind of go into a sideways holding pattern, and then all of a sudden the announcement comes out and you'll see spikes. Sometimes, depending on the announcement, these spikes could be, 50 pips to 150 pips. So you really need to be aware that these market reports are coming this week in the time to which they're coming. Okay? Also, be aware Tuesday morning, the Bank of England Governor Carney speaks. Now, when you see one like this one is that says Bank of England Governor speaking, what you do is click on the little detail here, and it will actually explain what they're going to be speaking about. So in this case, he's due to testify before the House of Lords in London. That's one I would probably not try to trade through, okay? Because if you're doing to testify, then when that news comes out, the market can spike either direction. Then at 5:10 on Tuesday, we have the RBA Governor Lau speaking. And again, if you click on the little folder icon, it will tell you he's due to deliver a speech. Now, this type of speech, the housing market and the economy, is not going to worry me as much on the Aussie, especially given that it's 5 o'clock and Nadex is not open at 5 o'clock. Now, even though I say Nadex is not open at 5 o'clock, they close for that 1 hour period. If you are in a touch bracket and the Aussie moves, then, if it touches either the floor or the ceiling, you can be taken out of that trade. Does everybody understand that? And if you wonder why, it's because Forex is still moving, okay? And as long as that Forex symbol, if that number is moving, then it could potentially touch your touch bracket, okay? All right. Also, we have the GDP quarterly, okay, on the Aussie Tuesday evening at 7:30. We have Also, the Canadian employment change and unemployment rate, that's actually a very good one to trade as well. And then also on Friday night, which doesn't affect us, we have Fed Chair Powell speaking. That will not affect us because the markets are closed, okay? So the next thing I go and look at will be my charts. And I always try to start with the higher time frames, which in this case would be the weekly. So the first thing that I would notice is that the USD JPY, the stochastics is at 85. That tells me that this market is really overextended to the long side if you're using the stochastics. Also on the USD Swiss franc, even though this is red and says 74, when I look over here and see that this is blue, that tells me the stochastics is starting to come down. Okay? And then we have the British pound is at 61. Now the next thing I do is go up to the daily. You can also see the USD JPY. The daily is at 79. So again, you're probably overextended on that time frame as well. On the GBP US dollar, the stochastics is turning down because this is at 81, okay? You also have a magenta peak here. Now, the magenta peak usually identifies that price is going to come down to this ATR. That ATR is currently at 30.47, so you're talking about a 200 pip move. That's pretty substantial. This is one that I actually like to trade with the touch brackets because it's a big move. Okay, so what would I need in order to trade a touch bracket for this retracement? What I would like to do is see that the 6-hour chart pulls back to the ATR, which is around 32.92, and then if a reversal bar forms, or if the stochastics is up here at 80, then I would be considering a potential short, okay? It would change my bias from long to short. Does anybody have questions on that? Is anybody having trouble with the audio? I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's just on the British pound, okay? The other thing is if you're more conservative, you could also look up and say, okay, if we're expecting this to go down, okay, we would be looking to see, red on the 1 hour charts, okay? So, if you wanted to trade that intraday, then that's a way that you could go down in time and say, okay, this says there's a potential to go down to 30.53, but are my lower time frames showing me that? In that case, you could, be trading, like the 2-hour binaries or even the 5-hour daily binaries, okay? Now let's go and look at the USD JPY because again, you see that the stochastics is at 85 on the weekly and 79 on the daily. Now, I would like this a lot more if this is at, 79, okay? Maybe if it was above 80, if this was above the 50 line, if this was above the 70, I would actually like it a lot more. In this case, we may get a retracement, but my overall bias here would be to the long side. But notice over here on the weekly, you have that ATR at 112.10. That means that if my bias is to the long side, I've immediately identified where that resistance area is potentially at. Currently it's at 112.13. So the first thing that I do is go and snap a line there on my daily chart so that I know, okay, if I go into this because my bias is to the long side, immediately when I go in, I'm going to hit a resistance area. Okay, so what I would like to do is see a retracement and wait for that retracement to come in before I go in a long position. Only because you have this resistance area here. Does everyone understand that? The charts I'm using are not on Nadex. They are on multi-charts. Jesus. So in this case, using this higher time frame just identifies where I would not want to go into the market. You know, a lot of you may do the breakout trades. Well, this is one. There's a lot of traders that probably went in here. It does not make their trading strategy incorrect, or, it's not a valid trading strategy. It's my trading strategy is you don't enter on the breakout. You wait for the retracement. Okay. This is your highest point of risk. I use the lowest point of risk. That's the difference. Okay. Now, the next thing I immediately will start noticing is there, any of these groupings that are the same color. For example, okay, on the Aussie, you have red on the weekly and you have red on the daily. But if you look at the other two, they're blue. Okay. So that tells me that that trend may be changing. So I may want to be really cautious on taking either a short or a long position. Okay. For example, here, okay, do you see how this is bouncing down from that ATR? Okay, this tells me that this should actually break through this line at 70.49. Okay, that's what it should do because it comes down, it finds support, it went up and found resistance, but now it should come down through there. But look at the gap that we had today. It went from 70.78, that was the close on Friday, up to 70.98. It gapped up. That means that something happened for that to have gapped up about 30 pips. Okay, so I'm going to let that gap play out before I even think about entering on the Aussie dollar. Now let's go look at the euro. Now the euro is actually blue on everything but the weekly. So here you're blue, here you're red, here you're blue. Okay, is this changing into an uptrend? Again, this is where you're coming into this ATR has offered resistance. And if you come over here and look, you can see that the stochastics is trying to turn upward, meaning that it should go back to 1501 if this curl continues, okay? So that's at 1505. So one of the things that I do is say, okay, we have 1505, which is just about here, okay? So what would you expect to happen on the daily? Well, you would at least need a bounce down here, okay? And that's because it needs to kind of gather up the strength to bust through this ATR, okay? Normally, you will form a higher low. It's probably going to be probably around 1316. So again, this is one that what I would like to see is that it breaks through the ATR. If this is really a turn, okay, and I want it to test, okay, you can see the same pattern over here. You see how it busted through and then it came back and formed that higher low here? That's the same pattern that I want to see over here, okay? Now, what if that doesn't happen, okay? If it doesn't happen, I still think you're going to get some upward movement because of this weekly, the way it's doing right now. I still think you'll get maybe a retest here at 1420, okay? And then it could potentially come back down. Does everybody understand that? And remember, they have a rate announcement on Thursday, okay? So that's one thing that you're going to have to watch. When does Nadex open on Sunday for Forex trading? I believe it's 6 p.m. What is the indicator I have on the very bottom? That's the ADX. And it actually has divergence built into it. If you see here, as this price is moving down, then the ADX is showing divergence all the way down. It's just telling you that it's weakening in the trend, Stephen. And this is the RSI and the stochastics, of course. I don't see any examples in here, but my favorite setup would be if all three of them align together and show you that they're overextended. Right now, we don't have that scenario. Now, we've been over the British pound, so let's skip over to the USD CAD. Remember, they have their rate announcement on Wednesday, and that is typically a very substantial move. Typically, within the last 10 years, on average, if you measured from high to low in that 15-minute period following the rate announcement, that's 100 to 150 pip move. Okay, and I mean, those are ideal situations to use. For example, the Nadex touch brackets. They're really good for those. But again, you have to be careful, because if it touches either the floor or the ceiling, you will be out of that trade. Okay, now the one thing that I think is kind of interesting on the USD CAD is you've got the white dot down here, okay? And then you also have an ATR above you, okay? So I think more than likely, prior to Wednesday, we're either going to get, you know, a touch of this upper level here at 3460, or it may go down to 2940. Now, what would you look at to say, well, which way is it more than likely to go? Well, in my opinion, I would look at the stochastics and at the RSI, okay? The RSI has not moved below zero. It's still blue, and the stochastics is going up. Now, since the stochastics is going up, I would expect this to go up and try to test that ATR first. So that's where I go down to my daily and saying, okay, is there, you know, confirmation of that over here? It's not yet. it has to reach up to probably around 33.65. Then it may actually come back and test the ATR. I think it'll test probably around 31.49. Now, this is one you're just going to have to watch right up into the period where they're going to have the rate announcement, because this is like what I call a holding pattern. They don't know whether they're going to take it up or down, so they're kind of holding right here. Okay, so I typically will go down even to a 15-minute chart right before that rate announcement and make my decision as to whether to go long or short. Okay, we are going to get some downward movement, more likely than not, because you're approaching this area of being overextended on the 6-hour chart. Okay, so don't be totally surprised if this goes down tomorrow and then back up. Let's go and look at the USD Swiss franc. And this one, you were overextended over on the weekly chart. Now, I think it may push this back down to 98.60, or it could push it down to 99.27. Okay, I think more than likely it's going to be the 98.60 because your stochastics is overextended. And if it pushes it down to 98.60, then you need to see, okay, do we develop a reversal bar like we did over here? In other words, does this support price? That's what it's looking for. It's found an area that is going to act as resistance, but does it find support? That's what it's looking for right now. You would want to see a candlestick pattern like this, followed by this candle right here. That would tell you that it would probably continue up. Any questions on that? Now, what would happen if I thought this was going to test 98.55? And let's say that it tests that. And when it tests it, then we have a reversal bar just like it was here. Okay. And I believed that this was going to go up. I would start watching touch brackets. Okay. This is an excellent example of why I would want to trade a touch bracket, because let's say, for example, that when it forms this reversal bar at the ATR, and the ATR is at 98.60, and let's say that price was at 99.00, I would immediately start watching the touch brackets to see what the touch brackets were for this week so far on the USD Swiss franc. Okay. And I can bring these over. Now see, this is a demo account. Okay. But what I would be looking at is a touch of floor, because if my bias is to the long side, I would be looking to go long, right? So probably 98.83 to 1.0133. Now remember that 0133, okay? Because that's the one that's going to make a difference. So it would be 1.0133. There it is. So this is why I would like that one. If it comes down to here, forms a reversal bar, okay, and then you can go into it, okay, you have the potential for that to touch the ceiling of the bracket. Does everybody understand that? change that to red. Actually, I'd probably choose the 98.33, which would be here, in 0083, which would be here. Okay? Now, visually, what you would see is, okay, if this was your entry point and this was your risk, this is your risk versus this is your potential reward. Do y'all see that? Okay. Now, what if your bias was to the short side? In that case, I would be over here using my daily. Okay. This is your area of resistance. So in this case, I'm waiting on it to come back to 1.0045. So in this case, looking at the touch brackets, it would be 1.0083. That would be your selling price. Okay. And remember, this is where we potentially would go to find resistance. Okay. All right. The bottom of that one is 98.33. Okay. So again, this is your potential risk. This is your potential reward. Now, this is where I think it will go back to. But remember, it's going to have to form that reversal bar, which would be a bearish reversal bar. So more than likely, you would be at least here before you could potentially enter that. Do I discuss any of this in your books? Can you say which one? I do. There's two books, the currency book and the candlestick book, Rosa. Both of them discuss these concepts. Not the not the touch brackets, though. The touch brackets are pretty new. I think they've been out since January, and I haven't written a book about them. Now, does anybody else have any questions about that? So if you were, with a long bias, you could actually focus on the weekly. If you have a short bias, you could focus on the daily. Sometimes, I've actually done both, where I would trade this for the duration of the day and then turn around and trade one on the weekly for another couple of days. Now let's go back and let's look at the USD JPY. And this was a good example of, do you see how this came back to this ATR and formed the bullish candlestick here? Okay. You could have went long on a touch bracket here, but now you would, potentially be going short with this overextended. You're just waiting on the bearish bar. Do you find that 50% retracement levels are valid reference points to use in the lower time frame charts? A 50% retracement usually is pretty good on any chart, regardless of whether it's on the, lower time frame or higher time frame. Well, thank you, Kennard. I think candlesticks, just, for everybody, that's the first thing you need to learn. If you don't know how to read candlesticks, that's the first thing you need to learn. Now, I realize there's a lot of candlestick patterns, and I don't cover all of them, because when you go back to the ones that I covered and compare them to other ones, they're covered. Yeah, I don't want to overwhelm you with a bunch of different names of candles. The bottom line is, where does it open and close? And once you know how to read that, you know, if you want to be an expert on all the candlestick patterns and their names, you can be. I just don't find that necessary for trading. So I tend not to focus on it. I've got one of the Fibonacci's, and it's actually, I've got them, they're based on weekly and daily values as well as intraday. And what I have found, Stephen, you want to pay attention to that. I think it's 23.8%, which is this yellow line, because if that line holds, it's usually going to continue up. Where if they break through it, and this is really kind of what you can see. Let me find an instance of it. Like here, do you see how they moved up to that yellow line? Okay, if that yellow line holds, it's going to come back down. Here, the blue line at this point is the 23.8, Stephen. But do you see how it held and they formed that reversal bar right there? More than likely, they're going to take out the low. But there is another pattern I wanted to see if I could find for you. This is as close as I get to it. Do you see how they came down to here? They broke through it and then they immediately go back to test it. You can really see that when you start studying the Fibonacci levels. It is very, very evident when you start studying it. And I think it's very evident too when they break through and then they come back to test. You can always see them test, and it's going to be at like the moving averages, or it's going to be at an ATR. It's just something that they always do. I think everybody evidently uses them. Well, thank you, Rob. I enjoy doing these. I'm sorry, I've had the flu for the week, and so it's making me cough a little bit. Okay, any other questions, guys? I do appreciate y'all coming on a Sunday evening to spend time with me. You know, Nadex has got so many different products, whether you're trading the Forex binaries or the call spreads or indices or even the touch brackets. I really do like the touch brackets for these bigger moves, especially like, for example, on the British pound. We've been getting some really good moves on the British pound because of the Brexit drama that's playing out. You know, these touch brackets can, well, they will allow you to increase your risk to reward ratio. When I see some of these bigger moves coming in, you know, good examples on the British pound when we had that magenta peak. You know, I can trade touch brackets, combine them with the call spreads, combine them with the binary options. So, you know, I was showing one of my clients last week where, okay, you might get this trade set up just every once in a while, but if you traded the touch brackets, the call spreads, and the binary options, you took one trade, one good trade setup, but you were able to make 6 trades out of it. You know, those are phenomenal. I have been taking zinc tabs. uh, a lot. Thank you, Gail. And elderberry juice. My daughter has me drinking that. What do I use for risk management? Nadex. That's the whole purpose of Nadex, is to limit your risk. Jesus. You know, I come from a Forex background. I traded Forex, okay? And let me tell you, was anybody in a trade when the Swiss National Bank came out and unpegged the euro? I was. And let me tell you, I wanted something like Nadex, okay? Because that was enough to bankrupt brokers, okay? Why? Because the price moved so fast and so violently that it didn't take any of the traders out of their trades. Now, I was not in the USD Swiss franc. That's probably the only thing that saved me. I was in the euro yen, and it actually moved in my direction. But when I saw the move coming through the computer, I said, I am getting out of this now. And yes, I made money on it, but I got out of it. I didn't care about the money part of it. I wanted out of it because I knew something had happened that was really, really bad. And with Nadex, I never have to worry about that again. Not ever. If I pay $25 to enter a trade, I cannot lose more than that $25. And coming from a Forex background, from someone that traded during the Swiss bank unpeg fiasco, it's monumental. You know, normally what I like to do is make a risk to reward of about 1 to 2. That's what I like. My average ranges from about 1.3 to 1.7. And I'm okay with that. Okay. You know, everybody tends to focus on, you know, their profitability percentage, and they need to focus on risk to reward because that's what makes the difference, in my opinion, of course. Any other questions, guys? I do appreciate all of you coming out and joining me tonight. And let me put this down and I can give you my email address. Okay, if any of you would like to contact me, you can send me an email at gm@tradershelpdesk.com. You can also visit my website at www.tradershelpdesk.com. You can also call me at 336-263-0122. If you get my voicemail, you will need to leave a message because I'm on the phone a lot. And again, I appreciate all of you coming out and joining me on a Sunday evening. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week trading. Have a good evening.